Yeah.
get started. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes. Shreya.
Awesome. Uh, Thank you again for the invitation, Professor Dev. I was very excited to come and talk to ACJ as I am from Chennai. I know the ACJ name. I've had friends who've been in your school and only heard really great things about it. So um, I guess the title of the talk that I put together was AI Automation and Hybrid Newsroom, as it involves some of the work that I'm doing at Bloomberg and have been interested since my time as a student as well. So, um, as a sort of introduction to who I am, my name is Shreya Vaidhyanathan. I like asking lots of questions. So, I currently work as a product manager at Bloomberg News, and my introduction to news actually began in engineering school, where I was part of our school like newspaper, and I went to school in Chennai. Got very interested in how information gets dispersed, how it gets made, and how technology plays in into this whole process. So I moved to grad school here at Columbia, where I really explored the intersection of computer science and journalism, and on to Bloomberg, where I have had the opportunity to work in ways that we can leverage this technology for improving the way we produce news, that we gather news, and so on. So that's sort of the TLDR of my work. And I'm happy to take questions now or in the end, but should we get started into the actual?
Yes, please, sir. Yes,
Great.
please.
Okay. So I think to take a step back before we talk about AI and automation, the topic that really sort of piques my interest is how computation and technology has changed the way we live our lives, which is, I think, no surprise to anyone. But for journalism in particular, I think it's two different or two buckets of um, looking at how computation affects journalism. One is the algorithms that we use to write stories in ways that we can improve the way that we gather news, the way that we research, that the ways that we distribute and monetize news itself. And the other side is writing stories about these algorithms. What are they doing? How do they affect our lives? What are the public good stories that we can write? And what do we need to know to inform our readers about these? So I think both these topics have definitely been very popular in the last few years, something that I'm personally interested in. And the former or algorithms that are used to write stories is most of the talk that I'll be giving today. The I think way that this is put is actually from one of my grad school professors here at Columbia who um, gave us an introduction into these different computational techniques that are used. Information retrieval on the left, machine learning, NLP all fall under the larger AI algorithm, and there's a lot of other different fields and domains that journalists are now equipping themselves with to be able to write better stories, really compelling, smart narratives. So, um, moving on to what automation is, I think these are the articles that many of you might have seen that paint a very daunting picture at times of what is this reporter? Am I supposed to be scared? And how is this affecting me? So I'm here to tell you things are a bit more systematic. Technology is a friend in a newsroom, and technology is helping people do smarter things in many ways. So um, what that really looks like is combining what machines are really good at and what humans are really interested in doing and are excited by. The way that our editor in chief here puts it is usually the what from a story or what you need to know in a story is what the machine provides. And the context and value add of like, why is this happening? How do I interpret this news? What do I need to know? Is still very much the role of a reporter and a journalist, as that's something that only they can do in the most creative and compelling manner. So the Bloomberg Terminal is a global information service that delivers real-time data and news. We have a global presence. A lot of people across the world use our information to make financial decisions in real time. And the kinds of um, stories we publish on the terminal are mostly focused on the market. They are across different mediums, and we have a lot of volume that we do publish in a given day. The importance of technology in the newsroom is something that has crossed different coverage areas. As you can see here, we have used AI in our coverage areas from live events, earnings, economic releases, and so on. And we have started working with our AI research group, our engineering group, as well as editorial in order to be able to build products that can serve our readers in real time and really provide a lot of data driven insight when someone comes in to read our coverage. Here is a very relevant example that might quickly give you an insight into what automation can do for covering a global pandemic, for instance. So we had a coronavirus tracker story that went out and each day would compile the data that we were able to see in different public repositories and confirm what was happening in terms of the affected countries and regions, what the daily change in the cases were, as well as the vaccine status or what is happening in each region. Here again, the entire newsroom was looking to cover the story, which was a global story, a financial health story, a story that was really, I think, important for every person in the newsroom. And we look to automation to see what can it provide, where data can really help us make sense of this massive story that's still going on. Another pointed example would be the way that we have um, financial disclosure forms that companies provide from SEC filings or SEBI filings in India. And this data is ported onto the terminal and is available for someone to be able to look at what is happening in the delinquency rate. The value of computation here is really helping make sense of this data and putting it in a way that gives you the size and scope that you might need in order to be able to write a story. So the automated story here gives you what the US credit card 30-day delinquency rate is and how it changes over time. And that really is the combination of a story idea that you might have already been interested in. But what machines are really good at is being able to compute in a very systematic and fast manner that provides value immediately. My team in particular at Bloomberg focuses on how we can leverage AI and create AI powered financial news. We build real time automated financial news um, through machine learning models that operate at low latency and very high precision. So what this really means is that we work on building pipelines that can process documents and produce automated stories in real time that really tells our clients, okay, what is happening in a particular earnings? What were the numbers? What was the immediate um, information that I can get out of this? And we have pipelines that cover a wide range of topics, as you can see here, which is from capital markets, economic events, liability management, and so on. And here is the acceptance criteria that we typically operate at. So machine learning is a discipline that is quickly evolving, and for using AI and machine learning in a newsroom that really values standards, it's important for us to place precision on a very high scale. So our acceptance criteria is something that we really take a step add from saying, okay, if we have to cover something that is really valuable for our clients, we need to do it in a timely manner, meaning it's not news if you tell me X person is leaving this company and moving to another company. And it's not helpful if you tell me something that's not fully accurate. So how do we build models that are valuable, timely, and accurate, I think is like the big challenge and makes my job very exciting as I come into work. I hear someone talking. Should I, or is it some feedback? Are you able to hear me? Is there some?
No, there is, Shreya, somebody's mic is on, I guess.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
now.
All right. Should I? Things are better now, right? I don't hear a feedback. So if you can tell
Yes,
me
yes.
things
Yeah,
are
but
good, I
it's
can.
better now. It's better now, Shreya.
Okay, wonderful. Shall I keep going or?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, so I've already told you, like, again, we need to operate at a high precision criteria. And this is not a very easy task when you ask someone who is in a machine learning and prediction environment where they typically want to see, okay, what can we do? And is precision something that, say, if I were to tell you, can I recommend a movie for you to go to watch? You could say, okay, yes, the recommendation was good. Maybe next time I'll try a different movie. Whereas when you're using AI to break news, you can't be wrong because you can't say maybe this is an M&A, maybe this company is buying another company. You really need to be like accurate so that you are not in a position where you're publishing news that's false or misrepresentative. So if this is so hard, why do we use AI, right? Like, why is there a team? Why are there so many people in journalism that are looking at how we can explore this? I think it helps in three very distinct ways. One is it helps us cover news first. So in the financial news world, news is valuable only when you are the first to know. So if you're the first to know that there's a corporate action happening, then AI really helps in terms of accelerating that process. The second thing is there's a lot of documents and research that needs to be done in order to find a needle in a haystack sometimes. And the time taken and the effort taken to do that sometimes is very easy for a machine as opposed to a human coming and trying to do a repetitive task in finding a needle in the haystack. And both of these combined and really help us improve our coverage in ways that say we may not have the ability to cover a story in all regions at the same time or be able to run a story at different time points. So it helps us really accelerate our coverage plans as well. The example that really might help you in terms of what we do is right here. So on the left-hand side, you can see there's a trading update. This is a press release that a company has put out saying that they are expecting their revenue and EBITDA for 2019 to be ahead of market expectations. So this is a typical document that might be released by a company. And they also have like some performance metrics and some comments that they have from their management. This is a story that a journalist would typically be expected to go in and they would want to say, okay, what is happening here? And the what is really where our models come in and help you in a matter of a second. On the right hand side, publish a story that says company X sees earnings that's materially ahead of market expectations. We also are able to provide this little story that becomes a starting point for a journalist that might be able to go in and provide context and value to someone who might not know why this is happening. So the process that goes from left to right is really the product development that happens in order to be able to build this AI system that can understand this release, understand the language, and then say, okay, this is what is happening. Our models are also at this point adapted to the context of financial news. So AI and machine learning in Google or other companies might have the more general application, whereas we're very much focused on, okay, what is the context that financial news has? How are people talking and what is the marker that we need to know to use NLP in a context where a company might say our operational costs have significantly decreased, right? So that's something that is a good thing for a company, whereas the word decrease may not always signify a positive connotation if you take it outside of this context. Similarly, we expect revenue to increase, but EPS will remain flat. How do we interpret that? What do we need to understand so that we're not, taking this sentence, only the word increase, and saying something that might be really out of context and meaningless in a story? Um, the third example that I might really delve into in this talk is the one over here, which is a press release that Fitbit put out when they were going to be acquired by Google. So this was big news. Google buying a company is always something that everybody is interested in, especially a consumer wearables brand like Fitbit. And the details in this press release were equally important for someone to understand, okay, how important is this deal? What the Bloomberg news story that we worked on was able to do is identify not only that this is an M&A, and then quickly put together what company was buying which company, what is the value of the deal, and what other information that you might need to know in order to really understand, okay, what is this acquisition? But how does this all happen, right? I gave you a bunch of different examples. I spoke about like the larger picture of how technology is introduced in every newsroom or like in larger newsrooms. I think a lot of you are even like familiar with some of these topics. You've heard um, different talks that might have like bordered on this. Um, so I'm here to peel the onion a little bit. So there is a process that um, AI product development really is something that we are focused on. And it isn't always just churning a pile of data and waiting till you get the right answers. That's, I think it's defined as 4 steps for us. What we typically go through in Bloomberg News and our team in particular is laid out in this slide here, which is a more systematic way of approaching, okay, how do we want to solve this problem using AI, and what are the steps that we need to take? And I can go through these steps with an example that I had shown you earlier that might hopefully elicit some of the questions that you might have or answer some things that have been, you know, a mystical earlier maybe. So going back to the M&A example, mergers and acquisitions are a very high stakes topic. It's an important topic when someone is buying a big company. It immediately has implications for different markets, and it's a consistent coverage area that Bloomberg is involved in, and that we really have been looking to improve the ways that we use our people in order to cover this. So on one side, it's really important. On the other side, because it's so important, there's a lot of nuance in this topic. There's different kinds of mergers, there's different kinds of acquisitions. And for a machine learning solution to be able to like help you break news on this, it's not really that straightforward. So when we had to work on this topic, we really had to start at the first step of, okay, what is the product we want to build? What domain and technical knowledge do we need in order to do that? So in our case, we were focused on building automated story, which is the end product that would help clients know or help people, our readers know when a company is announcing a merger acquisition. And the domain and technical knowledge that we really required was the understanding of this really complex space, what deal making is, how people cover it across our newsroom, and then trying to see if we can build a product using AI. Can we use existing techniques? Is AI really the best approach? Is it going to give us the benefits that I spoke about earlier, which is it going to help us break news as quickly as possible in the most accurate fashion and really help improve our coverage? So the goal for us was to have a headline that would give us the most important elements of the deal. As you may know, if your headline doesn't tell you what a story is about, then no one's really, that impressed by what the story might have inside it, especially if it's a story that is going out within a second and it really has to tell you, okay, XYZ is happening, put on your journalist hat and tell me why I need to care. And then the body of the story cannot also lack information, because people are interested in knowing what is happening in terms of this deal. What else can a journalist tell me that might help me understand the context to this story? So we really started from what a reporter or say a journalist might be thinking of very critically when they have to cover this space, right? So M&As happen very frequently, and you really have to know, okay, what M&A is this? If you see an unstructured document in a pile of other documents in the fire hose, can you identify using a machine learning technique what kind of M&A is this? Is this really an M&A? Tell me with most certainty that it is. Then the second step is a reporter might be asking, okay, who are the parties involved? Like, is it someone who is an important company that's buying another company? Are two different companies merging? What is this really about? And can you tell me this information again in a very accurate manner? The third thing is, okay, you tell me there are a few different companies involved. Is Fitbit acquiring Google, or is Google acquiring Fitbit? Is there a third company? Are there other people that might be interested in this deal? What else do I need to know? And the fourth piece of information that we really needed to describe is, what is the deal value? Sometimes companies are getting bought and sold, which is very important, but it's also equally important for a reporter to be able to say, okay, what is the significance of a deal based on the valuation of this deal itself? So using this, we moved on to our third next phase, which is really acquiring the data. So the any machine learning model or AI really, hinges on having high quality data that can represent the different contexts that are involved in this domain. And acquiring the data required us to do the domain research that I spoke about and understand what the pieces of the pie for this space look like. So for us in particular, M&As were not just mergers and acquisitions. They have a lot of different kinds of flavors to it. There are strategic reviews, asset purchases, stake purchases, divestitures, and each of them means something slightly different. So um, not just identifying whether this is an M&A, but going into the document and being able to say, okay, company A and company B are in this kind of relationship, and this is what you need to know before you proceed, was important. And it all hinged on the fact that we needed to have data that can help us train a model and understand these different flavors of this space itself. While doing this, again, we were in the design phase where we asked a lot of questions that might resemble, again, the critical thinking that a journalist brings to the table, which is, what is the significance of a particular M&A means for us? We have to say that we have high quality data across all these different types. What does the data distribution look like? Can we represent this context in the way that we design our systems? And how do we translate that from our editorial peers onto our engineering peers so that we build a system that actually gets used and helps us in the end? The process of what that looks like is building a model that can do something like this, which is, a document comes in, I'm able to extract that this is an event that is provided with a label of acquisition. And then I'm able to identify, here's an entity that is Fitbit Inc. Here's another entity that's Google Inc. And the valuation of this deal is 2.1 billion. So the machine learning pipeline does a variety of different tasks, some of them which look like really identifying the numbers from these documents and then discerning what these numbers mean, extracting the mentions of companies and people, and being able to put that into context is the core of the task from a technical standpoint. But it's not always just technical, right? When you're producing news, you want to know that you're doing this in a way that people still would adhere to the standards of your newsroom. And at Bloomberg News, this means that we can't just surface information. We can't just say this smells like an M&A. This is an M&A, and we needed to confirm that with a very clear control and goal on what we were doing, which meant that we had a lot of model and data validation that we did with the help of data-driven investigations, using some data science techniques like going into the data set and understanding what the proportion of different predictions were, going and talking to our peers in the newsroom to understand, okay, do these deals occur? What is the way that we should be interpreting this? Are we making mistakes in any of these? How do we correct those, and so on? So it's a combination of data-driven investigation with contextual evidence, which goes back to, again, a hybrid approach of really bringing the skill sets of a um, technical engineer in our newsroom, as well as our editorial peers who understand the context more than anybody else. This meant that we were able to set an acceptance criteria that could help us gauge performance. So after you build a technical pipeline, you have the system that can, do these interesting predictions that help us like print a story. But it's also important for us to set a very clear guideline on what does this mean in terms of our final performance itself. For us, it was obviously important that we don't print a story that would have the wrong company name, or the wrong deal value. So that was almost like an immediate criteria that we set for ourselves in order to be able to push this product to production. But more importantly, it was the questions of, okay, how will our users use this end product? Our readers will be able to read this information as soon as it goes out, but how would our journalists interact with this? What would they need to do in order to be able to cover these companies better? Meaning, if one of them was covering Fitbit, what is the immediate workflow that they would have in order to get this information and then flesh out a more deeper story, or work this into their reporting? So the three phases of like problem definition, acquisition, and acceptance criteria really bring us to the final part of, okay, how do you evaluate ourselves after you've built this, or when you're building this pipeline and using AI? And performance evaluation comes down to understanding two things. One is the AI model, or using AI is a vital and small part of the entire pipeline. There are different press releases, there's a lot of other document filtering, and there is a story that goes out after you understand what business logic you might need to add on top of the AI model. And how this all comes together is the second part of saying, okay, did we solve the problem? Our problem was saying we wanted to cover M&As as soon as this information is on a press release and improve our coverage across different coverage areas. And the second thing that we asked ourselves was, okay, now we're able to do this and publish stories. Does our AI system meet the set acceptance criteria, which is, are we able to produce stories, but also produce them at the high precision targets that we set for ourselves? Which then brings us to the third and most important criteria in a newsroom, which is, are our stakeholders satisfied with the results? Meaning, are we able to publish a story that is um, increasing our coverage, is actually factually representative of what the press release says, and are our newsroom stakeholders using the story in order to be able to improve their day-to-day work? And I think all those questions, rhetorically, I can say it's a yes, because we have, over the course of several months, been able to finally develop what looks like this, which is a story that within a second is able to identify that Bristol Myers Squibb is going to buy Myocardia for a deal share amount at a particular valuation. And the model also goes in to provide key excerpts of what this deal means. And this story serves as a backdrop or an immediate sketch that our reporters then use as a starting point to explain what this is in the larger scheme of things, or use it as a scratch pad for other stories they might be doing. So that is my time and like the, I think, steps that might give you a deeper insight into what AI product development looks like for Bloomberg, as well as how we're building this in a very systematic manner into our news workflows and working with our newsroom on a day-to-day basis. So thank you so much for listening. Happy to take any questions on anything that I presented or other topics that might be of your interest. I see one hand up. I don't know how to. I've never done this before. Just
So my question is, you talked about how the AI can be used to measure the value of in case of a merger or an acquisition. But how does it measure the impact? For example, Fitbit acquiring Google or Google acquiring Fitbit would change the industry in some way, and the stakeholders would be affected. So how does the AI work in measuring impact? Because I feel like impact of a merger and acquisition is something that is complex. So how does that work?
Sure. No, I think again, to go back to the first slide, which is we really focus our automation or our technology in answering the what questions. So our task was really to say, okay, what is happening here? And the impact of a merger, I think, as you say, is very complicated. The story here goes into what is happening, and hopefully the impact, or like why is this happening, is definitely something that is a follow-up story that one of our journalists might write, or something that would be done in I guess even an opinion column or something like that. So I don't think we get into why this might be impactful, or I mean, I guess the other way of answering your question is the complexity involved is being able to say, okay, this company is the acquirer versus the other company is the target, and changing the roles or reversing the roles, even in answering the what question, could have a huge impact for us. I guess that was the biggest like criteria for us while we were developing our models.
Oh, hi, Shreya. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. We have been like doing drills from press releases. When we do drills on press releases from companies, like at times the news is kind of buried within the press release, right? So it can be a press release about a business changing its plans, and it is having a mass layoff. Is she here? I don't.
I'm here. I just...
sorry. Yeah. So there is like a layoff also happening. So how does AI then choose what is the what? Like, how do you kind of figure out there? Like then the question is about what is the what question, right? So how do you kind of, how does AI help there?
Sure. So I think that's a really good question, because these are um, um, pieces of information in a release that become very much like the lead of the story, right? If somebody is like laying off a bunch of people and you want that to become like the most important piece of information, I think for us, the way that we go about designing any of these pipelines is really, again, defining what the topic of interest is. So in this story, we were really focused on the few pieces of information that we needed to know in order to cover an M&A, which is what are the companies, what is the deal value? Can you tell me if there's a financial advisor? Can you tell me if there is a lawyer on the deal that I can get? We did not focus on a topic like layoffs, sorry. But what we typically would do is, if it's an important topic, we would try to identify that and go about the same process to see if we can train a model that can identify that information. Say, for instance, I wanted to do this task of, there's a bunch of press releases that are coming in about, say, in the last 1 year or so. This is news that was not uncommon. A lot of companies did have information on this. So yes, we could have trained a model that maybe got this information. I have not done that, which I think would be a very interesting task to do. But yes, it would be custom and like topic specific rather than...
Thank you.
Guys, anybody else?
I see someone raise their hand. I don't know how to.
Can I?
Go ahead.
So Shyam, my basic question over here is that like we know that the AI is still in its baby steps, like in this industry, and like figuring out the what. These are still baby steps. But going into the future, do you somehow feel that even with press releases, the fact that when press releases come in, breaking news is the like only thing that's on the mind of journalists at this point of time. So with AI being powered enough to figure out the breaking news and like putting it up there, do you somewhere see the role of journalists shrinking with time, and what do we do then in that case? That the fact that this was one of the roles that we had in our job, and now we, after a point of time, we won't need journalists to break news from press releases. Maybe.
Yeah, Shreya, if I could just add to that, what exactly is the end game with AI? That is also something if you could just answer it together. Thank you.
Sure. So I think first I would say AI is rapidly evolving. I wouldn't say it's in like the baby steps are probably in the way that we are trying to leverage it in for news. I think it's a couple of different, I would answer it in two ways, I guess. One is being able to break news and doing it in a very quick manner is something that the machines are really good at. I think a journalist is probably not that excited to look for a number in a press release. And that's why machine is really like assisting them in order to be able to get this information. So we really see it as a value add in helping them write a story that might involve more of their creative abilities. And I think that is something I would say, yes, AI is still in the baby steps of. Is it really good at doing tasks of clustering information, giving it to you in a very ordered manner, putting in a bunch of documents together so that you don't do this manual task of like maintaining 4 files, getting 4 files shared with 10 other people and coordinating this? I think that is something AI is very good at, or machines are very good at in general, taking logical patterns that might have earlier lived in like some brains, and the mistakes that can happen, I think, from just people having information that isn't being done automatically is what AI helps you reduce. The creative aspects of journalism are still very much in the hands of journalists. I think that's something that even in our coverage for M&A, for instance, the typical way that if you go on the terminal and look at some of the stories, you'd see that there's, I think, 4 different angles that someone might be able to take and really tell you what does this mean. And the previous question of, okay, what is the impact of this deal is definitely something that you need a human to be able to like answer. What the end game is with AI, Gokul, I wish I could tell you. I would be, I don't know.
Can
I
I?
would say it's
Yeah,
above. It's above me and many other people. It's a very, I think, interesting question. Something that I would ponder over. I don't have an answer to.
can I add on to that, Shreya, please?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So to give you an example, say if you look at AP, who started the AI game, say back in 2014, when they did the study in 2019 after 5 years after introducing the wordsmith, and they found out that this their AI has been able to actually, after introducing the AI, they've been able to save 30% of the journalists' quality time, and because of AI. Because do you seriously think it does it takes a human to break stories? It doesn't. And that to 30% or 40% time they've been able to invest in quality reporting that is more investigative, more insightful reporting. So it's like how cars have become the extension of our legs, or a phone has become our second brain. Why don't you just stress a half full and a glass half full and a half empty case? You look at it in look at the positive thing. Look at the mundane in the structured data. How do you turn a structured in sports results? How do it doesn't take a human to actually do the sports results, the cricket or football results. Let the machine, like she said, this is pretty telling that let the machines do what they are best at, and let us do what we are good at, because machines can't be humorous, and machines can't connect with people. And if you look at what GPT-3 did, it wrote an opinion piece for the Guardian recently, and there is no human connection in that article if you read it. Let's do what we are good at, and let's save our time. Do you want to spend all your time rewriting press releases? I don't know, just that's what my generation wasted our time, rewriting press releases. Out of 10 hours, I spend, say, 6 hours rewriting press releases. Some stupid press releases, company earning reports, doesn't take a human's effort. Let the machines do that. That's the way I look at it. I don't know whether you agree with it or not. You can disagree. Sorry about that, Shreya. Go ahead, please.
No. I think, again, it's the repetitive tasks that a journalist might not even be excited about, which you want to then say, okay, if I understand what AI is capable of, how can I, leverage that to do some of my work? Isn't that, I guess, without being too tried, like the laziest person does the most like effective job. Sometimes it is like, oh wait, how can I figure out a way to do this in, a systematic manner so that I'm getting it done, but it's just, not something that I have to like spend my brain cells on.
Can you just quickly explain what Cyborg does for Bloomberg, please?
Sure. So I think some of the stories that we spoke about earlier, again, were the, exciting, the newer stories that we're trying to do. And we've been working on in covering different kinds of corporate actions, covering a story that's developing like COVID and so on. But a lot of our financial news hinges on the earnings reports and what companies are saying each quarter. And we have a system that we've developed, which is called Cyborg, that is, again, a human and machine integrated workflow that helps you identify what the financial state or the earnings releases and the numbers that each company puts out in a very quick manner, helps you get through and write the first story that might cover this. And we have a very similar workflow in a journalist then coming in and saying, okay, what is happening in this company? And these are very high profile stories because there are, say, Facebook, Google, any of the big companies might be giving out a release. If their numbers change, I think it's very important for us to be accurate on these numbers. And Cyborg helps you extract that and put it in a story. That's, I think.
Anybody else?
Hi, Shreya, I'm Ananya. You have been talking about how, as a journalist, we can leverage AI. Can you talk more about like what kind of leverage? Like, can you be more specific about leveraging, and especially for people like us? Some of us have Bloomberg terminal access, but most of people here don't have access to that terminal. So, like, how can you please be more specific about that? Like what kind of leverage we can have?
Sure. Again, I think that's a really important question, because what I spoke about was how we develop AI models that can help break news, right? So this is one way that might help you get a broader sense of what is happening in the industry. Ways you can really leverage AI in your own stories can go beyond what the terminal has as stories. So I would say one aspect is to look at, if I'm covering a story, what would I need to know in investigating a particular topic? Say, I think the biggest value add of services like topic clustering. Say you have a bunch of different documents, you want to know, okay, what are the different elements that are important in a stack of documents? How can I put them in a way that I don't have to spend, say, months to organize these topics and cluster them before I start my story? AI can help you classify those or like cluster those, then start your next, trail of like writing a story and painting a narrative. Within Bloomberg, we have internal tools that help our journalists sort through social media posts and help them make sense of a topic that they might be researching. Similarly, I think outside of um, outside of my like current job, I've seen people use AI in some really fascinating ways, which is to study the ways that language is used across different, say, documents. Is there bias that might be pointing towards a larger story in the way that we publish news? I think LSE did a study on looking at gender diversity in their own newsrooms. Currently, I'm part of a cohort of the Journalism AI program where we're looking at how we can use satellite imagery and maybe use AI to help identify changes within pastures of forests. So the task is really, there's a lot of illegal mining or cattle ranching that happens across forests in the Amazon. So we're working on collecting data that might be helping us detect change over time. So painting a story is like much harder than like just saying, okay, there's changes, right? So if there's a coastal line where there were forests before, what is the coverage? It like have has there been some change in that region, say in the Amazon in Brazil or Argentina, where illegal cattle ranching actually has impacted the forest coverage area? Can we use AI to pinpoint this? And can we train a model to identify this, number one? Can we then ask someone to go and report there, right? Like the really important part of journalism is still a human going and asking someone, okay, wait, what is happening here? Tell me, how can I help others understand this better? So these are just like a few different things that I think comes to mind for me. As I guess resources that are common to journalists, I would recommend some of the work that is on NICAR. Like NICAR is a conference that IRE holds every year, that I've been to. There's some fascinating work that comes out every year that people present. I'm happy to share links on that. Again, I think it's really like the mix of, okay, what techniques are out there that AI is currently doing, and then it still goes back to, okay, what are the stories I'm interested in? What can I do? Is there data on this? Are there documents that I can dig into? Is this public? Is the document, are these documents available to everybody? Are these documents with a particular source? How do I obtain this document? And now can I have someone either like help me train an algorithm that can do something, or can I train myself to do this and write the story? So I would say that is the way I look at it. I don't know if that answers your question.
Right, thank you for this. One more thing that I want to ask, there's a whole bunch of people they're talking about these days. It's also important for journalists to understand coding languages. So what kind of a R or Python, HTML, which is the best suited for, like for example, Harvard has an entire course for coding for lawyers and journalists. So what do you suggest?
Sure. So I think, if in a very tactical manner to answer the question, I would say, if you want to dive into a programming language, I would recommend Python, just because I think it's very easy to, um, you know, understand. It's more interpretable. It's also widely used and widely supported. So that is one answer. The second one I would say is, across industries, people are training themselves to interpret data better. So I would say, instead of it being coding languages, Python's really just becoming another tool like Excel, right? If you're able to use a menu-driven tool like Tableau or Excel to interpret data, and again, interpreting data hinges on you asking critical questions that you might be asking a source, but you're just asking data, and you're trying to make sense of it and analyze it. I would separate that a little bit from the languages that you might need in order to build the systems, meaning, I've been in engineering school and I work with engineers. the amount of like system and design knowledge that you might need for that is very slightly different from what you might need in order to analyze things. So I would say if those are two different buckets you're looking at, then Python would be in some ways the new Excel or the new Tableau or the new manual-driven tool that can help.
Thank you for that.
R is also great. I don't know. I know that R versus Python is a common like debate between even data journalists. So
Right.
Hello, Shreya.
Hello.
A lot of newsrooms use AI these days, and all of these newsrooms have more or less the same news values and end goals. And these are competing newsrooms, like they're competing with each other to break news. So how do you exactly deal with this competition when it's machine versus machine?
it's a very interesting question. Um, so I think the competition doesn't go away, the standards don't go away. It's almost like the same setup, but is how can we maintain those standards and still be the best, right? So that is, I think, the real like objective for a newsroom. And I don't think machines necessarily change the way that you might change those things at all. Those remain. It's just, does it help you serve that end goal in a faster manner, in a better manner? And can you do it a little bit more cleverly? What can I think it only helps. If it can help, it helps. I would say that.
Thank you.
Or having machines doesn't take the competition away, if that's the other way to like think about it. Yeah.
Can I go?
Yes, please. Anybody else? Shreya, are we holding you?
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I'm very like,
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
happy to answer questions. Again, I feel like my opening slide was I ask a lot of questions. So I'm always, aware that I should answer questions if there's any.
Yeah, thank you, Shreya. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So a lot of companies who have tried to use AI have faced some ethical issues, like Amazon had a secret AI which showed bias against women. So have you or your team faced any kind of these ethical issues when working with AI for journalism?
That I think is an important point. I think the AI community is slowly like understanding what are the implications of this technology and how we can study them better. To answer your question for our team, I would say no, because we deal very specifically on financial press releases and financial news, which typically doesn't have a lot of demographic information. And I think it's definitely something that we are aware of, and we have been seeing what is happening in other.
Thank you.
It's an important consideration for anyone building any system these days, I would say. So
do you think companies can face a problem when adopting AI for journalism? Anything that comes to your mind?
Again, I think journalists and newsrooms already operate under standards and ethical guidelines. So at least I can definitely say that we have to adhere to the standards that our newsroom sets. So it's almost like a checks and balance system that already exists for us in many ways. I think, again, just from my personal understanding, Facebook has an editorial board or like a board that they've had to like put in place, right? It's like they're, in some ways, if you ask people, they're adopting things that newsrooms and like other companies have been doing for ages before. So it's.
Hi, Shreya. So I just want to know one more thing. Are there companies which use AI to counter the AI that you are using? Like to maybe muddle press releases a little more or something? Is that a thing that happens or could happen? No.
That's
So
a good question.
Probably the deep fake is even it's a deep fake. Nancy Pelosi's and how. Yeah, that's probably the. how they got back at Mark
No, no, that's a really interesting question. I think, do we have hoaxes that we're supposed to be wary of when we are training things? Yes. I don't think I can like I don't know of any like systems that have been deliberately like opposing us. I don't know. That sounds very much like a sci-fi movie I'd be interested in and would like to star in. Thank you.
Ma'am, to follow up with what Gokul asked, I had a similar question. So a couple of days back, there was a press release by Global's Newswire, and they had released a press wire saying that Walmart is going to start accepting Litecoin. And your competitor was the first to break that news, and they got it wrong because it was a fake press release. So is Bloomberg doing anything to, to put checks and balances so that such incidents can be avoided?
It's a good question. And I think I alluded to it a little before, which is this is very important. Like we can't I think source validation, if I were to put it that way, in order to be able to go through the steps that I went through in art, saying, okay, now this is a valid source. Now tell me step A, step B, step C, and then publish a story. So it's almost like the first step in building an AI model that can identify that this is a worthy source. And we do have checks in place that can help us do it. So there are steps that we take in order to ingest documents in a way where we can verify it in manners that, with markers that we have seen before is all I can tell you.
Anybody else? If you don't have any more questions, can we wrap it up? Yeah. Okay. I take that for a yes. Thank you so much, Shreya, for
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, what I think it's too early in the morning for you, and it's a work day.
No.
So thank you so much for taking time for us. And yeah, some of you might be getting back to you if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I was just
email or
yes, happy to be in touch. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. Or I know that I was gonna offer that Bloomberg has internships, but I learned that you're already plugged into the Bloomberg.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, not.
I don't have to plug anything. I'm getting kicked out of this conference room. So again, I can send you my email, Twitter, whatever you want. But thank you so much, and hope to see you all.
Have a nice day, Shreya. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for finding time for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.